Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, I'm going to go over the laws or lack thereof of states in the United States that literally do not have homeschool laws. So I have a group of previous videos that talk about the states that have various laws concerning homeschooling, going from complicated to not so complicated to registration to this is absolutely nothing. So these are the very few states that actually have no homeschool laws. Now let me be clear, why it is a whole lot easier for kids to fall through the cracks in these states. It is illegal not to school your kids. So all of them have education laws on the books. So they require you to educate your children through a specific age range, but they're not monitoring the homeschooling. So there is no registration, there is no monitoring at all, or in some places there are actually no homeschool laws at all. So we're going to finish off the United States, at least these states, with these last states. I am going to cover DC and the Mariana Islands and Puerto Rico and basically those territories, because they do not, I'm using a site called Time for Learning, which is a curriculum site, to get this information because it was the most secular, aka non-religious place I could find this information. So this is where this information is coming from. I will link the information below because it does have quite a bit of interesting and good homeschooling information. But again, it is a curriculum website. So heads up on that. So let's start off with Alaska. Clicking in here, Alaska homeschool laws. So here is homeschool laws. If I can find them, there we go. Here's our homeschool laws page. So there are homeschool options. So as I said, there are legal requirements to educate. So in the state of Alaska, you must educate your children over the ages of 7 and 16 and either attend school or comply with Alaska's homeschool requirements. So it does look like they have requirements. You can homeschool under the homeschool statute, which is as long as you are the parent or legal guardian, you can homeschool your child. There are no requirements to notify the state, seek approval, file forms, test, whatever. You can homeschool with a private tutor. Again, that's your choice. You can homeschool with the school board approval. So you can seek school board approval if you choose. You can submit a written request, or you can homeschool with as a religious or private school. So again, you can choose to do this. But again, why they do have homeschool laws, there is no real registration required. You can homeschool because you're a parent. So, and yeah, that's pretty much it. There is no real other laws. I mean, like they always do, they recommend you keep a portfolio and if you take standardized tests, but otherwise there's really no laws at all. So it looks like they do have graduation requirements, but I can let people check that out or talk to your state for yourselves. So that is Alaska. Moving on to our next state here. Let me do a double check. It looks like, I believe we're going on to Idaho. Idaho. So let's look at Idaho here. So homeschooling laws in Idaho. So homeschooling laws. Yeah, so Idaho homeschooling education laws don't require parents to teach for a set amount of time or per year. In fact, the only requirement is for parents to provide instruction in subjects that are usually taught in school. So there's no qualifications. The only time a parent is required to notify a school is if the child has previously attended the school. So they have to formally withdraw the child from school. So they're also, let's see, they do require children between the ages of 7 and 16 to attend formal schooling or receive compatible education at home. Homeschoolers cannot graduate from a homeschool program before their 16th birthday. So let's see, no, there's no notice of intent. They does not require them to send a notice of intent. Again, there are homeschool laws, but there's no real registration. So you do have to notify. No, there's no official withdrawal either, so they do not essentially require you to do anything. There are no record keeping, though again, they do recommend you keeping a portfolio with transcripts and stuff to kids if they want to go to college, or if you ever end up transferring into a school system. So that is completely it for Idaho. So the next state down here is Illinois. So moving on to Illinois here. So homeschooling laws, Illinois. So let's see. Yeah, so homeschooling laws, let's see here. Be clear. Yeah, it's not giving me an age range here. So I'm sure you do have to require them. It's just not showing up on the website. So it is, not to mention it's federal law. You have to educate your kids. Homeschooling is not an excuse not to educate your children, as I will rant further on probably at the end of this video, or multiple times. Let's see. So back to Illinois. So let's see. They must cover, they do, let's see. Yeah, there's no registration. They do require you to teach language arts, mathematics, biological and physical science, social science, fine arts, and physical education. Again, let's see. This is part-time homeschooling, which is something different, so you can't send your kid to education. Otherwise, let's see. No, it doesn't talk about, again, there's no requirements to do anything. So, yeah, there's no submit any forms, records to the state whatsoever. The district doesn't keep track of anything. So, again, this is why kids can fall through the cracks pretty easily in states like this, because there's no record keeping. Again, they recommend, like most states, keep a portfolio if your kids either want to go into college or into other public school systems. So you have to keep a portfolio to keep track of things. So let's move on to the next state. Now, there's not a lot of states in this video, so we've covered almost everybody. New Jersey. On to New Jersey. As opposed to New York, which is very, very funny. New Jersey, as far as I can tell, does not have any homeschool laws at all. Yes. So, let's see. Down here. So there is a compulsory education law in New Jersey state that every child between 6 and 16 years of age attend school, public or private, or receive a equivalent instruction elsewhere than a school. So that means they're not legally required to do any sort of documentation. So that's typical. There's nothing there at all. In fact, yeah. New Jersey is one of the least regulated states for homeschools in the nation, which is really, really funny considering New York is one of the most regulated. We go from, you really want to homeschool, instead of living in New York and your husband works or your spouse works in New York City, just go to New Jersey, and then you don't know how to do anything as opposed to dealing with all the paperwork in New York. So, yep, that's pretty much it. It just goes on to talk about switching from public to private to homeschool. There is literally, from what I've seen, absolutely no laws on the books whatsoever for the state of New Jersey. Again, however, there is a compulsory education law. So you do have to teach your child between the ages of 6 and 16, but there's just no homeschool laws on the book. Homeschool laws on the books. So let's move on to the next state. We are nearly done because New Jersey. On to Oklahoma. So I actually have connections to both Idaho and Oklahoma. My husband has family in Idaho. In fact, it's probably going to be one of our first family trips is going to be to Idaho this summer. Oklahoma is actually where his uncle ran a dentistry business for many, many years. And I do believe his youngest male cousin, his uncle's youngest son, will probably end up making his home there. They are, I think, in Arkansas right now. His wife is doing a residency for pediatrics. So, on to Oklahoma. Oklahoma, yeah. They're not homeschools, they're not regulated. Their parents are not required to register. There are no homeschool requirements that need to be covered. other than teaching at least 180 days for children the ages of 5 to 18. So they do have a compulsory education law. So not necessarily a homeschool law, but you are required to teach your kids. So it's compulsory to teach children. So between the ages of 5 and 18. So otherwise, there's nothing else. Though I do believe when I read the state, it is implied that you should probably inform the school district or they're going to come looking for you. So while there is no official laws, there are some unofficial things you might need to do. So yeah, they're recommendations. They are not required, but it is recommended that you send a notice of intent to the homeschool to the principal of each child's schools, alerting to them the fact that you will be homeschooling. And yeah, Oklahoma, they strongly suggest. And that's the same for New Jersey. I forgot to mention that when I looked at their website. There's no requirements, there's no laws, but if you take your kids out of public school, they're going to come looking for you. CPS most likely will be called because they'll assume your kid's just not showing up at school because they're still registered, and they will come looking and think, is the kid dead? Are you abusing the kid? They will come looking. And that's probably true for most of these states. So if your kid's already been in school, they'll come looking. If your kid hadn't been in school, probably not, but I believe people probably would get suspicious. So, but again, with Oklahoma, they do recommend you do this, and they recommend you teach the subjects of language arts, mathematics, science, social studies, which includes civics and the study of the U.S. Constitution, health, safety, physical education, and conservation. That's an interesting. Oklahoma and conservation. Well, who knows? Half of Oklahoma's become an Indian reservation due to a Supreme Court case recently. And no, I'm not joking. They stole land from the Native Americans, and the U.S. Supreme Court kind of just gave it back because, again, they never legally took it. So, yeah, the capital now technically is an Indian reservation. From my conversation with my husband, he actually did a lesson thing for this. Most likely what's going to happen is Native American tribes are pretty much going to be in charge of their own people and leave everybody else alone. Or they can put casinos places. But otherwise, primarily, it's just going to be applied to native laws, going to apply to natives in the majority of Oklahoma. But homeschooling is not probably going to be affected. So, but yeah, that's it. They don't really have specific homeschooling laws. There are a bunch of recommendations here. So, again, send a notice of intent or they'll come looking. Essentially, they recommend you doing that. And then you keep homeschool portfolios. Again, pretty common in other states. Let's move on. I believe we're almost done here. Texas. I believe Texas is the last one on this list. Because, of course, it is. It's Texas. So, let's go down to Texas homeschool laws. And the page here. So there are apparently homeschool laws. So Texas homeschooling laws only require a bona fide instruction for the student, a curriculum to be visual in nature, such as textbooks, workbooks, online programs, and the following subjects to be covered: reading, spelling, grammar, mathematics, and citizenship. So homeschools in Texas are considered private schools and therefore not regulated by the state. And as such, there is no minimum amount of days you have to homeschool. Let's see. Those are the only requirements to homeschool in Texas. So let's see. Yep, and that's pretty much all it says. So again, if your kid is already in school and they take them out, you probably should inform the school you're planning to homeschool, or they will come looking. Or yeah, inform people that you're going to homeschool. Otherwise, they will come looking, or you and CPS might come knocking at your door. I do believe that's it. I'm going to do one quick check to see if there's any more. No. So that is actually it. So those are all the states that do not have homeschooling laws. But I'm going to make this crystal clear if I don't rant and rave in all sorts of other videos. Homeschooling, unschooling, is not an excuse to not educate your kids. In fact, the original creator and dreamer, so to speak, for homeschooling is also now considered the father of unschooling, whose name for some reason I cannot remember. And I'm going to do a quick check of him. This was back in the 70s. And he has written several books. I do believe he's, educator John Holt. So this was his brainchild originally. And this was more people who were anti-establishment. That's what it started off of back in the 70s. It was then taken over by terrorist organizations like the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, which are alt-right Christian groups whose sole purpose is to eliminate all checks and balances to protect children in the homeschool environment. That's their primary goal, is to eliminate all laws involving education and pretty much just make things disappear so they can, I'm assuming, abuse, neglect, and just indoctrinate their kids. They're very anti-government, even though they're a bunch of lawyers who were fighting the government, essentially. Prior to that, people who wanted to homeschool kind of had a more cordial relationship with the school system. So they talked to them, they weren't fighting them. These guys went to war with the school associations. And then they pretty much commandeered and held on to homeschooling for a very, very long time, until the internet came in and things are diversifying like crazy. I think I have another video about that. But again, and I will repeat this a lot, homeschooling, unschooling, not an excuse not to school your kids. If you are a child and watching this video, or were an adult who were homeschooled and you did not have an education, you were not homeschooled, you were not unschooled, you were abused and neglected, and this is not the fault of the concept of homeschooling. It is the fault of your parents, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and their lobbying and their legal stuff and all their lawsuits trying to get rid of the protections. You can blame them. And you can blame the governments who took their money or whatever and listened to them and voted to either not implement laws, which is also very likely because homeschooling is a brand new idea. Again, it kind of came to flourishing back in the 70s, or just not implement laws, not create laws, or not or denied laws that wanted to be created in order to protect children. So again, homeschooling is not the fault. This Legal Defense Association, crazy Christians, and your parents are solely responsible for screwing up your life, which is kind of common. So don't blame homeschooling as an idea, because it's a verb. It's not as much as we wanted to do it as a thing, it's an idea. So that is it for the United States. I will cover the territories in DC in a different video once I find that information. If you like this video, you want to see more, check out my previous US states, because some states are far more complicated. I will also be covering Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and as much as the rest of the world as I can. Thank you.